I'd like to call this regular Jamestown School Board meeting to order. Our meeting today started with facility tours, beginning at Lincoln School and then moving to Roosevelt Elementary School. I'd like to thank Principals Sherry Schmidt and Pat Smith, as well as Jerome, for showing us around and showing us some of the things that we need to look at in those schools. I'd like to also recognize all those in the audience. Especially today, I see that we have our dual credit Intro to Education course from Jamestown Schools here. So welcome, and if you have any questions after the meeting, feel free to ask any of the board members. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Dan, would you be willing to read the board norms?
The board developed norms are to share and respect varied opinions and speak with a united voice once a decision has been reached, to prudently prioritize resources in a student-centric manner that aligns with the district's strategic plan, to exhibit a mindset of continuous improvement through adequate preparation for meetings and a commitment to board education, to commit to assessing board effectiveness to ensure high-quality governance for the staff, students, and community of Jamestown.
Thank you very much. We have no requests for public communication tonight. Moving on, are there any conflicts of interest on the agenda tonight? Are there any conflicts of interest? Are there any conflicts of interest? There being no conflicts of interest, we'll move on to the consent agenda. At any time, the board members can pull items from the consent agenda. We don't need a motion. So if there's anything you'd like to pull for further discussion, we can do that at this time. If not, can I have a motion to approve the agenda? Motion by Aaron, second by Steve. Any discussion? We have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Moving on to our regular meeting, we have nothing under recognition tonight. We did receive a thank you note from Jeanette Wagner for activity passes. We appreciate that. Thank you. Nothing under reports. Moving on to board education, we have educational competency, data protection, and security with Mike Armitage. And there's also the educational competency following that for the school boards convention. Go ahead, Mike.
Okay, data security and protection, state and local cooperative effort. I can't stress how closely we work with the state and what we do. State provides our Cortex XDR anti-malware software that includes threat hunting, and is backed by support of the North Dakota Information Technology Analyst. It is basically what the state provides everyone. So every device, Windows device we have in the district has this on it. And the benefit of it is the state is monitoring it. So if Diane's machine had a virus, it would let me know. We'd come clean it up, take care of it. And that device Diane had, everyone in the state now knows about it and is protected from it. So it's kind of like if you're a Star Trek fan in the Borg, the collective one knows, they all know. Kind of. So that's our main protection way. We also use the Nessus Tenable Vulnerability Scaling software. The state runs that twice a year. It lets us know where we have some weaknesses at, what we need to do better. Hey, whoop, there's an open port over here. That's an opening for somebody. They take care of us that way. We also participate in the excuse me, I'm getting a different mouth today. 22 Cyber Maturity Assessment. The state runs this annually. We've participated the last 2 years. They compare us to where other schools are at, what we're doing, what they're doing, areas that they suggest we could improve in, things we could do different to make us more secure. All of our data runs through the state. The only point of failure, single point of failure we have in the district is Dactyl. That's where our state information comes in at. If Dactyl were to go down, we would be down. Otherwise, if it can get out of Dactyl, we have redundancy built in and we won't lose anything in the district. We kind of have it as a star topology, so if Roosevelt started giving us problems and they're attacked and they're starting to spread, we can sever that. It's kind of like an octopus. We can just cut that tentacle off. The rest of us can stay up and we can work to fix the problem over in Roosevelt. Okay, the state has its own list, white list and blacklist for websites it allows, internet sites it allows to. They also block ports. They have a list that they want. If we have a port we want open, we have to ask them to open it. If they've got it open, we can manage it locally so we can close it. Again, locally we support and maintain that cortex. If they find a problem, they call us, we take care of it. We use Windows Defender locally to block ports because, like I say, the state has their white list and their black list. They have some things open that we may not want open. So we can create our own blacklist locally, and we use Windows Defender to do that as well. And our own whitelist, which goes with the state. If the state has a blacklist that we can call them, if we can justify it, they'll open it for us.
Dr. Leck has a question. Go
Just
ahead,
a question, Mr. Armitage. You talk about whitelist and blacklist. Can you explain that a little bit for us that are
Sure.
maybe not as tech-oriented as you are?
Whitelist are the good sites, blacklist are the naughty sites. That's basically it. So the state has stuff that they don't want open. Could be from virus attacks. It just could be information just doesn't need to be shared. So we're kind of the same way. We have to have like 3 or 4 different ports open for our food service software to work. So 3 of them were open. The 4th one we had to request to the state that they open for us. So then they continue to monitor that, and we also continue to monitor it as well. Did that answer the question? Okay, good. We block all access to files. If you don't have permission from the tech department, you're not going to get in. We're really happy with that. And again, the state keeps us on our toes with that as well because they try and get in on us too. Like I say, they provide our internet. They give us our addresses. They give us our domain name services. And that's pretty much it. We manage everything ourselves. They give us those addresses, but we crack it all, do everything ourselves. So if the state wants something in our network, they have to talk to us. They can't just tap in. They can turn me off, sure, and they have done that before, but just Diane when she had that one problem, but it's okay. So. Let's see. As far as updates, which is probably the biggest part of security, is keeping updates up to date. We use group policy objects, or GPOs. We run that through our domain controller, which handles just about every Windows device in the district. It will automatically push those updates out. The only thing I can't get it to do is reboot the machine. So we tell the teachers, if you see that red dot or that yellow dot down there in the bottom right, reboot your machine. Because they'll always call me and say, hey, it's not working right. Is that update in? Ah. 90% of the time that cures our problems. It's just those updates mess people up if they don't get that restart. So we have a program called Securely, and we use that to mobile device manage our iPads and also mobile device manage our Chromebooks. It's our third MDM we went to in the last 4 years, but I'm happy with this one because it offers on-site and off-site filtering. So during COVID, when we had everything out, they weren't on the state network anymore, so they didn't have the state filtering, but they still had our filtering because Securely covers on-site, off-site. So it kept most of the stuff down. Nothing's perfect, but it did a real good job of sending them out there unprotected. Our main servers, the important ones like SUI and food service, are on our virtual server, or we have hosts. We have built-in 3-time redundancy up there. We can host approximately 15 servers on our virtual machines. And the beauty of that, we use a program called Hyper-V, and it gives us snapshots. And we schedule those to go at 10 o'clock and 12 o'clock, 10 o'clock in the morning, 12 o'clock at night. So if, we'll pick on Diane again, if she inadvertently deleted a file, she can just call us. We can go back into these snapshots, and we keep approximately 30 days worth. So we have about 60 pictures of every server on the virtual host. And oh, here's the file. You know what? You deleted that 4 days ago, Diane? So we'll go back 5 days, grab that file and put it back in. The best example I can give of that is back in 2018, food service got a ransomware attack. We were able to knock that server down, go back 2 days, grab a snapshot, put it back in, reinstall the updates that the food service had made with theirs, and in 6 hours we were back up. So we had to re-enter the data from that morning, but other than that we were good. We didn't lose anything, didn't have to pay anybody, which was the best part. So that in 2001 when I first got here, we had a server. Those are the only 2 times we've been hacked in the 23 years I've been here. So we work hard at that. Lastly, phishing. We have a campaign called Before You Know Before. And we started it last year, and we just kind of did it unannounced as a baseline. We're not going to point fingers, but some people in this room did open a fishing attempt. So what we did with that, then we took that baseline, we set another campaign up this year, and we also signed everyone up for training. We've got a 15-minute session of training that these guys go through, take, little videos, quick. It's not too time-consuming. You can even do it over multiple attempts if you'd like. I can't tell you the difference it's made. The number of people that are calling me, hey, Mike, is this a fishing attempt? Is this good? Is this bad? Emails, is this good? Is it bad? Nathan and Michelson and I are both just astounded at the number of calls and the awareness our staff now has because of this. It's just a great program. We're really liking it. Let's see. That's pretty much all we do. You don't see what I do, but I do it. Any questions?
So what do you see as the biggest risks to the district then?
Biggest risks are pretty much like they are everywhere else, and I like where networking is going. They've got a thing called fabric. Right now, if I want to connect to Roosevelt, I go to this point from my office, I go hit that switch, I hit that switch, I hit that switch, and then I'm into Roosevelt. And any one of those could potentially be a vulnerability point where if you got in, you might be able to crawl into the network from there. With our next firmware, our next switch upgrade, networking upgrade, Fabric lets it just go, it's going to automatically make itself virtually the fastest route. So if the fastest route to Roosevelt is me to you to Jason to Roosevelt, so be it. But it's all virtual. So even if you get in, there's nowhere to go. So that's a huge thing I'm looking forward to being able to put in. So yeah, just network connectivity and the exposures, because once it's out of the building, I can't control it anymore. Once it passes the state network, they can't control it anymore. If somebody tries to piggyback in, this should stop a lot of that. There's no real physical connections for them to jump into anymore.
What about personal devices?
Personal devices, we try and bring them in. We make sure they're updated. We visit really hard with them to make sure they need it because we do supply a lot of equipment for everybody. So it's a rare circumstance where we'll let them bring up a personal device in as far as a teacher. Kids, we have the guest network set up. We turn that on in the morning and we turn it off about 8:30 because we've got about 1,000 phones and it just eats bandwidth no matter how hard we try. So we're hoping to get a second wireless controller next year that will help put that at the high school. That'll alleviate a lot of this as well too. But we have 3 different VLANs. We have a presenter that we have 250 licenses in, and that's when anybody comes in to the district and wants to present. We can let them in without being into our secure part. Then we have the guest, which is not secured, and anyone that walks in the building as long as it's turned on. So off during the days, we have the bandwidth because you get 60 devices on those access points, and they just crawl. It's all explained as a big slice of the pie. If there's only 2 of us, you get a half, I get a half. If there's 60 of us, I get this much, and you get that much. So we try and limit the number of devices on there, and cell phones are the worst. So we're hoping with another wireless controller, we can eliminate some of that bottle jam too. So if teachers want to let the kids use the phones in the classroom, students use the phones in the classroom, they just let us know, and we have JPS Wi-Fi 3 that we kind of stick out there. Again, it keeps them off the sensitive stuff, but does let them use it in the classroom. So kind of has need basis, I guess is the short answer.
Thank you. Any other questions? Diane, go ahead.
Mike, you mentioned that, I believe you mentioned that one of the state's functions is to compare districts, a comparison of security. How do we normally stack up? I'm guessing we do very well.
Yeah, we're always in the top quarter. Yeah, we haven't been below that yet. They've only been doing it 3-4 years, so. But yeah, rolling back, we've always easily been in the top, pushing the 10% usually.
Jason, go ahead.
Well, first of all, 23 years in the district. Thank you for your service. We're fortunate to have your expertise for so many years. Back to the, what's that?
I didn't have it when I got here.
Yeah,
Not all of
I
it.
think we came to the district about the same time. You were pretty smart then. Back to the naughty list. The state has their lists that they don't allow. I'm assuming you're talking also about like our student libraries' access to sites. Who is determining, or how are we determining what we're allowing at those sites or what we're deeming inappropriate? What's the standard, or is there a process or no?
We pretty much just follow the state guidelines on what they consider to be. And it sounds way worse than it is. Usually it's just like a Google safe search where we're not getting those images that they shouldn't be pulling up. That's probably 90% of it. It's very rare that, occasionally you got a wild young man that wants to learn hacking and is not afraid to go look for it. So we try and stop that too. But
Any other questions? Thank you, Mike. I appreciate you coming and sharing with us. And okay, we'll get the microphone turned off there. Thank you for doing that. And next, we're going to move on to our North Dakota School Boards Association conference overview. And I'm just going to let board members jump in and talk about the areas that they went. Dr. Leck, do you want to start out with anything, or?
Sure, I have some in my report. I'm just going to be honest, include the school board's convention along with the other administrator conference that I attended during the same time. For me, probably the most significant takeaways, and I'm not trying to steal anybody's thunder, but was the Title IX requirement changes. That was a pretty large one for me in the school law seminar. I thought as we progress on, that's going to be a significant piece of policy change and protocols and practices that we need to consider as a district. So that's something that I felt like I learned a lot about. Other topics that I was interested in and attended, there was a session on strategic planning that I attended. Dr. Jeff Schatz is former superintendent in Fargo, and he helped to facilitate our initial strategic plan here a couple of years ago. I always enjoy talking to him. It's obviously a passion and a strength of his. And I enjoy listening to him and the procedures that he uses to develop strategic plans. So I attended a session for him. I saw a lot of different sessions on, and attended a lot of different sessions on self-care as a professional. As board members, I know you know this, but the teaching profession is really tough. It's a tough position. It's a tough profession, and you have to take care of yourself, and you have to make sure that you aren't burning yourself out. The internal, external push-pulls that happen in classrooms can be tough on teachers, and we need to support them. But I've seen a lot of different sessions, particularly lately, related to self-care and how are we caring for the professionals that we have, and how are professionals caring for themselves. And so I attended a few different sessions there, and sessions on teacher shortages, recruitment and retainment. What are we doing as a state? What are we doing as a district to make sure that we are recruiting and retaining high-quality educators? Those people that are teachers, that our students and our community deserve to have. So I attended a few different sessions on that. As I referenced in my superintendent's report, I was fortunate enough, I serve, as a board, you've heard me talk about the NDASA focus group. It's a legislative focus group. I'm fortunate enough to serve on that. That gave me an opportunity to have a conversation in a small group with Governor Doug Burgum. We talked in particular about the challenges of behavioral health, the lack of available services for families, for students, the supports that schools have in place, the changes in the juvenile justice system has changed behavioral health and what that needs to look like in schools. That was a big topic of conversation, and then recruitment and retainment of staff as well, and the governor's very interested in how we're going to do that. As a part of that conversation, then I also served on a panel of administrators that talked at NDCEL with the governor moderating that panel discussion. So that was an interesting experience as well. Lastly, I led a breakout session that dealt with our Teacher Leadership Academy Staff Morale Improvement Project. That's something I shared on in the past, and it's kind of gained a little steam, and it's now a 3-semester project for our Teacher Leadership Academy. So we were sharing that just as what potentially school districts could do to target and improve morale across those 6 different areas of items that impact staff morale. So that was what I have taken away from these last couple of conferences, and as always, I appreciate the opportunity to attend those. I think they are outstanding opportunities for me to grow professionally, as they are for all of you, and I know how important that aspect is, the professional growth for you as board members as well. So that is what I have.
Who else would like to go next? Jason, go ahead.
Sure. That this conference, whenever we get the email, I'm always excited to register because it's always it's a great way to recharge as to what we do and why we do this. Like Dr. Lex said, Title IX, I think all of my colleagues here would agree that Title IX was probably one of the major takeaways on that. And the only other thing I'll say about it is I tend to pigeonhole myself when I hear Title IX thinking of just athletics, but it's so much more than just the athletic component. And that's all still being determined or at the federal level, so we'll hold off on that. The first day, too, I enjoyed the hiring of foreign teachers presentation. It was very enlightening to hear some of the creative ways districts in North Dakota are using this. I think we've all heard of the Fargo right before school starters or whatnot. But there's some smaller schools that are working with these foreign teachers as well. And it's a great avenue to explore if needed. I know sometimes the public isn't all that keen on that, but and it's not an easy process either. That's one thing I took away from that is it's quite an involved process to be able to come here and teach in America. So, and then just a couple other things. The legislative panel or forum was kind of how we ended the day on Friday, and we're still extremely fortunate in North Dakota that our communities are still invested in education, meaning we have our challenges, obviously, challenges other states have, challenges other places don't have, but we still are a state where we're very interested in doing what's best for kids. And of course, one of my roles on any school board would be to make sure we continue to do that. But I was very optimistic. Of course, we had 3 politicians and it's election season, so, but very optimistic that they are ready and willing to address these issues. And like I said, we're in better shape even financially than other places to start addressing that. And I was surprised, I don't remember which Congress person said this, but a third of our state budget now is devoted to public education. And I would have never guessed that it was that much, which I think is great. I think now the time would be, are we using that money to the best of everything, efficiencies and whatnot? But I left that being very encouraged that our legislatures are, for the most part, I think, willing to face what's ahead, and very open to at least discussing and meeting the challenge. So those were my takeaways.
Thank you, Jason. Very informative. Go ahead, Aaron.
Yeah, I would echo some of those same comments as well. Again, the school law seminar and the Title IX information I thought was very eye-opening to me. They not only described some of the potential changes that they're looking at, but they also described the process that they're going through and how those changes get identified and implemented. For me, it was kind of an eye-opening. I kind of knew this, but I didn't realize the depth of it. The Department of Education is basically, rewriting interpretations of the law. They're a bureaucratic organization. It's not a legislative law change here, so it's interesting on how that evolves from administration to administration. So I would encourage the public to. If you're interested in this area, to probably engage in the process of understanding what that means and how that could affect the district. It hasn't flowed out yet. There's It's out for solicitation. There's a lot of comments from different organizations, like 240,000 comments on their proposed changes. So it is going through a process, but again, it's a bureaucratic process. Another one I attended was the board and superintendent relationships. It was interesting. It was good general info. They did some case study examples on primarily what not to do. But I think, the Jamestown district has it pretty good, so we didn't fit in a lot of that, but it was just interesting and an awareness on some things to look for. Interesting one that I attended on Career View XR. So there's a company out of Fargo, and they're focusing on North Dakota career fields and bringing web-based and virtual reality applications, experiences to the classroom. And it's really giving a good, I think, a better idea to the students on certain career paths that they could consider, and again, with the focus on North Dakota industries. So that was interesting, and I'm going to get some more additional information to be able to pass that along to the school board and administrators, just to, if it's something interesting for the district to consider. The developing strategic and long-term plans, again, that same, there was a good description on, some of the foundational elements of building a strategic plan, and then emphasizing the importance of metrics and progress reviews and annual updates and keeping on top of that. You're looking 3 to 5 years out, but it should be, something that's refreshed annually. And then another interesting one was budgeting for student outcomes. That one really, I thought, was good in providing a perspective on how we look at budgeting and its impacts on the academics and the outcomes of what we're teaching. They did have a website, Edunomics, that gives a lot of data in comparison. You can look it up and see percent proficient and basically how much you spend on a per student basis, and do a comparison within your state, within your school. And they walk through some examples, and they talk through, why is this school not performing well relative to this one? And so it's just another resource that can be used to help guide us and ask questions. And that was kind of what I took away from that is, if we're performing at a certain level that's different than what we want, are there other examples out there, comparisons that we can go and look at and just ask some critical questions. So. Yeah, that's what I got. I thought it was a really good conference overall. I learned a lot. That was actually my first one in person. I've only done the virtuals for obvious reasons, but it was interesting. I'd highly recommend it. So.
Thank you, Aaron. Yeah, thank you. Go ahead, Dan.
There's a couple I want to highlight here that haven't been mentioned yet. Well, I guess, Aaron, you did mention the budgeting for student outcomes. That was it was very data-centric, which means it was really exciting for me to sit in through that one. They basically have mined data from all over the U.S. and put these comparisons together, and some of their conclusions were counterintuitive to conventional wisdom. And so the people who went to the training, this is out of Georgetown University, the people who went to the training couldn't say enough good about it. It was very expensive, but there's some good contacts we have within North Dakota to take a look at how we can use that data. And that does, I think, potentially come into play when we start talking strategic plans and asking the right questions, like Aaron said. The other one was kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum. Dennis McKinty was our keynote speaker for the second day, talking about when we're dealing with multiple stakeholders, and lots of people, they're very passionate about their opinions and their stake. How do we get the stories out? How do we understand each other and pick up what is it we're really trying to communicate? I went to the breakout session that happened after that, and he went into more detail about strategies for asking people the right questions, getting their stories out, so when we come into things like strategic planning or negotiations or just one-on-one discussions, we can accurately tell and convey our message, but then also receive the message back. And from there, we can have a decent shot at coming to a conclusion that we both can accept. So, yeah, very, again, very well worth it, and they did a good job of pulling this together.
Thank you, Dan. And Diane, go ahead.
I would echo what several people have already said. It was an excellent conference. It was the first time I got to attend the law seminar. I enjoyed it. The Title IX information was very interesting. It was presented by someone who was passionate about the fact that things are going to change and districts need to be ready. They're tooling it differently than it was. I guess it goes from administration to administration, and this one is she's focused mostly on the fact that we won't be just looking at sexual harassment, we'll be looking at gender-based harassment, and there is a difference, and she spent quite some time on that. I found that very informative. Overall, it was a very good presentation. And then, not to repeat what others have said, I'll just highlight what I attended that was different. I like the Southeast Regional meeting because we got to ask questions and give feedback on the sessions that we had been to, and that was very good, I thought. I also attended the Grow Your Own Elementary Teacher out of UMary, and it highlighted the fact that the teacher shortage across the nation has reached, in my opinion, a critical level. And this is one way to tackle it. UMary is now offering an online program for training and certifying elementary school teachers. And I think it's something that will probably spread across the state. Apparently, it's been quite successful so far in what they've tackled. And there's a need for it and an interest in it. So I would see that growing. Grow Your Own Elementary Teacher will grow. I also attended the legislative panel. I was optimistic, just as Mr. Rohr said, I was very optimistic about the interest level of our legislators in North Dakota education. I have been impressed with that since the minute I moved here 20 years ago. It's a priority for this state and always has been, and I think it shows in our culture. The outcomes show. I was pessimistic in that I didn't feel like the panel represented the people in the room. And I won't elaborate on that except to say that is not within our realm of business. That's the voters that put the people in the legislature. And I saw a lot of young people in the room. I saw a lot of women in the room. And it just wasn't represented on the panel. But that's, a subject for another day. But I am glad that they are focusing on education and are very open-minded about what this next session will bring to the educational component of our state. So the last thing that I did was I went to making a diploma more accessible. That was probably the most interesting session for me. This is new legislation that came out in the last legislative session. It's a way to keep kids in school, to allow more people to get diplomas. It's called Option 2, and the North Dakota DPI representative for GED Business was the one that presented it. And he said that Option 2 is something that a lot of districts are not tapping into yet. I'm sure Dr. Leck knows all about it. But it's a way for kids who are still enrolled in school, high schoolers still enrolled in school, to get to their diploma without taking every single class and going the same route that their classmates are going. They can use the GED process to test out and achieve diploma status without necessarily taking the GED route. So districts that are using it have someone in the classroom who is helping them learn the material and take the test and get their diploma. I think a lot of districts aren't using it because it's staff-oriented. You have to have the staff that are there and ready to teach these students what they need to know. But it is an excellent route, I think, for getting graduation percentages up. And I don't know if it's appropriate for our district, but I do know this, it's board approved. it's not through the DPI. If the board decided they wanted, for instance, to do this in Jamestown, they would work with Mr. Gaylor. Dr. Leck would work with Mr. Gaylor. He would present the option to the board, and we would decide whether we were going to adopt that particular avenue. So it's very interesting. And all of you may know all about it, but I did not know the details of it, and it was very interesting. And one of our legislators said that our graduation rate in North Dakota is 96%. I think that was a little high, so this is another avenue to getting it to where we want it, and picking up students that might otherwise drop out of high school. So I enjoyed it very much. I'm glad I went, and I've been to many of them, and I really enjoyed it. Once again, I agree with Mr. Rohr that it's a wonderful opportunity for us as school board members. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. Any other comments or follow-ups? And Sally, you had some sessions also. Would you be willing to share?
Ditto to all of you guys. We had, as you know, business managers met separately. So just to let you know, one of our session was Amy Kopis, who's the head of the North Dakota Council of Educational Leaders, talking to us and talking to the business managers and say, you guys are a key role, and letting, that organization, letting the business managers know that they're there to support us and for professional development or whatever. So, and Amy did a great job of talking about the legislation and the professional development opportunities that that organization will offer. So that was just one of the key points. So,
Thank you, Sally. Any other discussion from the board? Okay. Or questions? Okay. Moving on. Dr. Leck, would you share your superintendent's report?
Sure, thank you. I have a written report as always. A lot of these areas are already on your agenda for later. I do want to touch a little bit on the AIA agreements. I was asked a great question about the impacts that these would have to the district and the operations as we are asked to extend those AIA agreements. And I've worked to outline how that impact is at each building. I see it as being kind of a neutral, impact, or generally no impact. And these extensions are almost they all relate to supply chain issues. It's difficult for us to get electrical gear. But I think Consolidated Construction and our subcontractors have done a really nice job of making sure that there are temporary fixes in place so there isn't any kind of facility impact or any significant facility impact in each of those. So, my recommendation with the AIA agreements will be to approve those. The facility upgrade or facility project updates, as I have been, I've included those the progress of what's been happening there. You'll have two change orders, one from the middle school and one from the high school. The high school was conduit painting. It's based on where it was located. It kind of stuck out a little bit, and I felt it should be painted, and so that's where that conduit painting comes from. The mechanical penetration, I've outlined that. That's based on the removal of a window, some insulated paneling. It required some additional work with that refrigerant piping, and then they had to drain and recharge that line, so that's related to those changes. Later on, I'll have a recommendation on the business manager and human resources discussion that we started last meeting. As we looked through this and as we initially made the conversation, as we originally started this discussion, my head was in a different place than where it came after the analysis. And I'm glad that the board brought up having this dialogue because my initial thought was status quo. This has been working and it should continue to work. And I think this was an opportunity now to engage in how we're doing things, why we're doing things, and how they're structured. And so I'm appreciative that we've had this discussion. As Sally and I had internal discussions, we got some external feedback from other school districts and how they operate, what they're responsible to do. Some of that's challenging because we're talking larger districts and then some smaller districts, and so that looks different. We're kind of in the middle. We don't have a real peer. Maybe some of the closer peers to us still have enough size difference. Mandan's quite a bit bigger than us. And Wapaton and Devils Lake are still quite a bit smaller than us. And so it's hard to make that comparisons, but I think we got a nice sense. So we had good conversations with other districts. But really the biggest takeaway from me was the analysis of who was taking on HR functions. And it's not just Sally that has HR responsibilities. We've really disseminated it over time to a lot of different individuals. And I don't think until we started engaging in the dialogue did I realize the depth to which that occurred and how much we are piecemealing that out to other people and how inefficient that really is. And from a staff standpoint, how challenging that becomes. So who's my point of contact? Well, on this issue, it's this person. On this issue, it's this person. And for administrators too, I'm now responsible for a different function than my building principal position because that's been placed in my portfolio and certain responsibilities. And I think we have a lack of efficiency by being the most cost-effective that we can be. And as we really looked at those, I looked at two different options. One, continue on as we have, and the second option to split them into some type of position. I had a third option that we talked about, and that would be, making two full-time executive level positions, HR director, business manager. And I didn't ultimately bring that as a recommendation because I think we're a little, that we might not quite be of size for that solution. But I think it's certainly possible. But I think from a budgetary impact and from a staff size standpoint, we came up with a second option that I think is a little bit more in line with what we need. And I think that can work well within our current structure. And so that's the recommendation that I'll bring. And I can talk about that more when we get to the recommendation, but I've outlined that in Board Memo 87. I would recommend, although I continue to talk to Sally, that she can't retire. She just keeps assuming that she can. So when you hire a new business manager, my recommendation that will be that they go through the North Dakota School Boards Association's Business Manager Certification Program. There is a cost to the district for that. I think it's relatively nominal for the training that you get, but it's a staggered program over a few different semesters in which builds capacity for any school board or any business manager. This is a different animal. Being a school business manager is different than other CFO positions. The working in school accounting is simply different. This provides a better level of support for whoever you bring in. Unless they have worked in a small district as a business manager, some of this would be very new to them. And even if they've been a smaller district business manager, there are programs and funds and supports, responsibilities that are somewhat different in a larger setting. So either way, somebody's going to need some support. Dr. Mike Bitz is the superintendent at Mandan. Him and I were actually both asked to serve on a curriculum committee for this program to, again, in the near future, look to revise the program, make sure that it stays relevant, and that we're focused on the right things for this program. So this program, I've actually taught in this program for 10 years now. I teach ancillary services and data reporting. Those are two areas that I teach in for this program, and I think there's opportunities for us to continue to improve and make it more relevant. But I think it's well worth the investment for your next business manager to ensure that they have all the support that they need. I did update the hiring timeline just a little bit, especially depending on what the board formally decides on the business manager position and human resources. We had a great meeting, I thought, with the Enrollment and Facilities Task Force. It was a meeting last Wednesday. We had parents, teachers, administrators, school board members. We had such a good discussion on enrollment. We didn't get to anything else beyond that. But we have devoted to monthly meetings, 90 minutes at a period. We want to make sure that we can stay productive during that time, although I think people would have been still pretty engaged if we had continued on in our last meeting. But beyond enrollment, we'll continue that discussion, but we're going to shift to facility needs. We're going to shift to the funding component and how all of those things play together. And ultimately, by the spring, have built some consensus around recommendations to bring to the Jamestown School Board. But I was very, very encouraged by the open-mindedness of that group, the work they're willing to put into those discussions. I don't think that initial meeting could have gone better. So I'm very pleased with that. I have some reminders in the superintendent evaluation that I would just address with the board. As a reminder, this is the formative evaluation that's required by law before November 15th. The School Boards Association recommends that you act on each of those sections individually, so you don't have to do it joint, as a full evaluation. It's section by section, so you'd make 6 different motions on each of those, or on those sections, rather than one summative, and that your ratings are satisfactory or unsatisfactory. That's what's codified in law. And as always, I want to thank the board for your critical feedback. That's important to me as I look to get better at my job. I can't do that if I don't have critical feedback. And so I appreciate the comments that have been embedded into that evaluation, so I can understand, not just see where I'm rated, but understand where I'm at and how I can be better and how I can do my job a little bit better. So thank you for that, and that is my report. I'll stand for questions if you have any.
Are there any questions from the board? Aaron, go ahead.
Yeah, just in regards to the facilities task force, I would just like to echo your comments there on the how open-minded everybody was, and we broke up into 3 separate groups and working groups and walked through some of the data that was presented. I think it's mostly data that we've, as a board, have seen before, but then diving down into it in a little bit of detail, asking some probing questions to better understand, why things were the way they were back in 1996 and the facilities we had then and where we're at today and how that compares. And but just the dialogue that was occurring, I wasn't really sure what to expect going into it, but there wasn't, no one had any predefined agenda in our discussions. It was open-minded. It was probing questions. It was gaining an understanding of what is the district up against. And I think it's going to be a valuable process to go through to develop a recommendation. So.
Thank you, Aaron. Is there any other comments or discussion or questions on Dr. Luck's superintendent report? Do you have anything to add?
Well, I just had one more thing. It got me thinking as we heard the edunomics. We had 2 board members that referenced the edunomics session. An activity that I have slated for our board retreat is an activity called Budget Hold'em. And that is something that actually is developed through edunomics. And I think that the board will enjoy that activity as well. It kind of ties those same elements of that were shared in the, how do we use data to make the best decisions from a budgetary standpoint. And I think you'll enjoy that activity, but I wanted to make sure I talked about that. I think that's something the board will appreciate, that is tied to something we talked about earlier.
Thank you. Oh, Diane, go ahead.
One more question about backing up to the business manager and HR specialist. Because you're so involved throughout the state, do you see some good response to that applicant process? Or will it be like teachers, there's a shortage?
Well, I think there's a workforce shortage. That's a great question. There's a workforce shortage everywhere. And I think no matter what we do, we aren't going to be able to replace Sally. We can't replace 30 years of knowledge and institutional experience. You just can't. We're going to have to support that person. Whoever we hire in whatever role they've had prior to this, we're going to have to support them. That's why I think the business manager certification program is important. And it's just like any other position. You hire good people. You train them for the things that they can't do. And so we'll hire a good person that has the requisite experience, education that's necessary to do the job, and then we'll train them to do what they don't know yet. But asking us to carbon copy Sally, that's not going to be possible or reasonable, but we'll get them trained and supported so they can do that job.
Good question. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Then moving on in our agenda, under F, under old business, we have nothing. Under G, new business. Number 1, nothing under activities. 2, buildings and grounds. So we have 3 things under buildings and grounds. A, approval of change order number 2 for the Jamestown High School. That was the conduit painting. Is there a motion? Motion by Aaron? Second by Diane. Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. B, approval of change order number 4 for Jamestown Middle School. That's where they had to run some mechanical through a window area. Is there a motion to approve? Motion by Dan, second by Diane. Any discussion on that? Okay. There being no discussion, all those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. Under C, does the board wish to approve all 3 at one time, or would you like to do them separately? I'm seeing some nodding yes. Motion to approve all, number 1, Gusner Elementary, 2 middle school, and 3 high school for the AIA agreements. Motion by Aaron, second by Diane. Any discussion on those? We have a motion and second to approve the AIA agreements for Gusner Elementary, middle school, and high school. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. Nothing under curriculum assessment instruction. Nothing under finance. Under personnel, we have under A, a recommendation for business manager and human resource generalist position. Is there a motion?
I move to approve option 2 to define the posting of the business manager position, add a position for a human resource generalist, and to amend the job descriptions for the business manager, assistant business manager.
As written in our drives, okay. There was motion and by Aaron and a second by Steve. Yep, and then some discussion. Dr. Leck, would you like to share some?
I just want to add one comment. I want to update what I inadvertently wrote an incorrect salary range with human resources generalist. My suggestion should have read 45,000 to 55,000, and it reads 50 to 55. I want to widen that range a bit, and that was what I intended. It just didn't come out that way.
Do you accept that amendment, Aaron, to that range for your motion? It was written in there in his informational thing, so I think you're just being transparent.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure it was clear that I wanted to widen that range more than I wrote in there.
In the informational piece, I believe, is where that was. And so.
Doesn't change the top end, just
No.
lowered the bottom end.
Yep, and that's just in your informational thing, I think, right? Not, right, okay. So motion by Aaron, good with that? Okay, second by Steve, good with that? Okay. So we have a motion and a second by Aaron and seconded by Steve to approve the recommendation to post the business manager position, add the additional HR generalist, and update the job descriptions as posted in the Google Drive. Okay. Dr. Leck?
I don't know if, as a board, you want to discuss the salary ranges that I put in place. If you go with option 2, I felt like Sally's position currently is compensated as a HR director / business manager. And I did feel like you would want to maintain a similar salary range if you kept Sally's position as it is. I feel if you take those human resource responsibilities away, you could adjust that business manager position down closer to 80 to 90,000. And then again, as I said, with the human resources generalist, that would take on some of those job functions that I've outlined in the board memo, that would end up being the 45 to 55 that I've referenced earlier. So there would be a overall increase in terms of, compensation, but the position itself would be lowered. The business manager position would be lowered, and to eat up some of that additional cost. But I felt like that was the most reasonable recommendation to make in terms of losing those job responsibilities.
And I think you do have in both of those DOE, depending on experience,
Of
right?
course,
I think
yep.
in both those
And
descriptions.
I would
so-
open up for discussion if the board feels like that salary range is appropriate. That was what, as Sally and I looked through what business manager responsibilities and compensation ranges are, I felt that was an appropriate place to start. Maybe as we get in the process, we'll see that that isn't, but I feel like that's a great place for us to start in those positions. Of course, we want to find the right person, but that seems like a good position, a good salary to post, range to post.
Any discussion from the board? I think they're appropriate ranges at this point. Just post and see. Is there other comments from the board? Okay. So, Jason, go ahead. Just in salary and/or general.
Okay.
We're still in the
Yeah.
discussion
I
portion
think
of the
we,
motion.
I
and
think we
second.
just start with the applicants, and go from there. My question is, what will the interview committee look like, or the selection committee?
So I would recommend that I would lead that interview process. A board member would be represented similar. I assume we would treat it similarly to any other administrator that we have interviewed in the past. That includes a committee of, I would assume we would have a business office staff member, likely a teacher, maybe another administrator, a board member. That's likely what that committee, I haven't fleshed out exactly what the committee would look like, but the process we would use would be really quite similar to what we've done before. My recommendation would be if a board member hasn't served on a committee with me in the past for hiring, that those are the people that are prioritized. I think it's important that board members see the process that we go through to hire. And so if you haven't served on that, I would recommend that that's who, as a board, you appoint to that responsibility.
Diane, go ahead.
This is a naive question, but could Sally serve on that board?
I would think Sally would say no. I don't think that Sally would want to. I can only put myself in that position to say, if you are replacing a superintendent, I would not want to be a part of that process. I think that is now the board's process. And Sally would give us great insight into what is needed, but I think that's something the board should decide, despite her great knowledge.
I would concur, Diane. It would be great to be in there, but I think it's the board's and Dr. Luck's insight that needs to,
Agree with that. Any other questions, discussion? Jason, go ahead.
Just a serious thought, Sally might not take it serious, but depending on our candidates' knowledge, experience, would the board may consider contracting Sally for a period of time for training, depending on how the timeline this goes out, not 5 days a week, not full-time, but, just another thought that, like you said, Dr. Leck, it's 30 years of knowledge that, and, I think it would be worth our time to ask Sally if we need her, if she'd be available.
We have engaged in those conversations internally. And I can say, too, we're talking about a range for a starting date that encompasses most of January. Sally's last day would be the end of January. Our potential start date is as early as the 3rd. So we could already have some crossover. And I have no doubt that as much pride as Sally takes in the work that we do, that she would be willing to help us out if necessary, even whether that's a phone call to answer some questions or if we needed something a little bit more than that. But I also feel like a range of a month would probably give us the necessary support that a new person needs. But we'll cross some of those bridges when we come to them.
Steve.
What is the time frame for that, the business manager training session?
So typically, they start one every year. So I believe that the first semester starts in the summer. So that would be something that would be available at that time.
Good question. Anyone else? Any other questions and discussion? So we have a motion and a second. The motion is to post the business manager position, as well as add the human resource generalist position and update the job descriptions. We have a generalized salary range, and we're going to start with that. I think it was the discussion that we had here. Any other discussion about this topic before we vote? Okay. So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. B, approval of superintendent's evaluation. First, I'm just going to Dr. Luck and I had about an hour conversation this past week, and I'm just going to touch on a little bit about our conversation regarding the formative evaluation, and then we will go through and approve each section of it. I did read through all the comments, and I appreciate the board meeting Amy's timeline as well, and I appreciate Amy keeping me on track as well, so thank you very much for that. There were a couple things that we talked about more in-depthly. One was just different professional developments, and I think that is often a topic that comes up in superintendent evaluations that I've seen in the past. I know also it's a topic that's been brought up in the communications committee. So that is something and we had further discussion on that, and just the amount of professional development. We have our own objectives, as well as the state also has mandated professional development as well. And so just kind of talking about the differences between those, and we may even have some board education on that in the future, because that is constantly changing as well. So we're going to move on with that. The other is the strategic plan. For those board members that have been on the board for a while, if you remember, prior to COVID, we would have the progress monitoring of our strategic plan, and we would meet things and we would take them off, remove them. We are still within our 5 years of our strategic plan, and we talked about, we just kind of had some good discussion on, getting back to that, where we need to be back to that, as well as, do we want to just stick with what we're still within our 5 years, stick with what we have? Do we want to have an additional board retreat? Is this something moving forward? Do we want to tackle ourselves as a board or hire consultants? So those are just some general kind of discussions that we had. We also talked a little bit about Dr. Leck's schedule and time. Some of the things we appreciated that were also mentioned positively in there was his attention to behavioral health in our district, his commitment to just bettering education overall, the state boards that he serves on, the input he has at the state level, all that really benefits Jamestown. It's a big commitment that he makes, and I think it makes everything better for all of us. So we also appreciate his commitment to JPS as well. That's definitely evident in all the work that he does for the district, so much appreciated. And we also talked a little bit about just appreciating the time there's a lot of things that we don't always see that he mentors, spends a lot of time mentoring. We have new administrators again. We've hired new administrators. We're now going to hire a new business manager and another HR. It takes time, to mentor new staff. And he does take the time to do that, and he spends a lot of his time doing that as well. So that is much appreciated. So unless anyone has any questions, I'm going to move forward and go through each section and look for a motion in a second. And I also, I'm going to read the rating. The rating is, I think we should actually in the future include the rating on the evaluation. I don't think it's on there on the final report. Is it on there? Did I miss that? Okay, so it's sideways, so when I scroll, so it's sideways, so I may have missed that. So, but 4 is the top end. 4 is exceeds expectations, and so the rating that I'm going to state is out of 4. I know I rotated, and then it seems like it goes back again. So, yeah, that would be helpful. Thank you, Amy.
If you need to, you can just right-click and rotate clockwise.
Yeah, I
or
did that, and then I bump
counterclockwise.
it, and
You
it
do
seems to
have
go back.
an
Yep,
option to
yep,
do
the
that
goal
if
and
you're
vision,
familiar.
perfect. I appreciate that. Thank you,
Just
thank
so
you
you're
very
not all
much.
looking like this as you.
I know, that's, and it seems like when I bump it, then it flips back, so thank you for that. Okay, so section 1 of the superintendent evaluation is goal and vision setting. And the board rated Dr. Leck a 3.47 out of 4. Is there a motion to accept and approve the goal and vision setting section of the superintendent evaluation? Motion by Aaron, is there a second? Second by Diane. Any discussion on goal and vision setting? Yes? Is satisfactory, yes. We need a satisfactory, to approve it and satisfactorily. Thank you, Amy, though that is the correct. Aaron, do you approve it? And the second, Diane? Any discussion on that? Okay. So we have a motion and second to approve the goal and vision setting as satisfactory. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. And now I'm going to do section number 2. Okay. Section 2 is board relations. So I have to read this one. Am I reading that right? 3.6? I think that's correct. It's very little writing.
3.6,
So, yep. 3.6 out of 4 is what Dr. Luck rated on board relations. Is there a motion to approve section 2 board relations as satisfactory? Motion by Dan. Is there a second? Second by Aaron. We have a motion and second to approve section 2 board relations as satisfactory for Dr. Luck. Is there any discussion? There being no discussion, all those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. That's section 2. Moving on to section 3 is human resource management. Dr. Leck rated a 3.53 out of 4 for human resource management, component 3. Is there motion by Jason?
I would move to approve satisfactory rating of 3.53 under human resource management.
Thank you, Jason. A motion to approve satisfactory for human resource management and a second by Steve. Any discussion? Any discussion? We have a motion and a second to approve component 3 for human resource management as satisfactory. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. Component of section 4 is curriculum and student support services. The board rated Dr. Leck a 3.56 out of 4 for curriculum and student support services. Is there a motion to approve this section as satisfactory? Motion by Dan to approve curriculum and student support services satisfactory. Is there a second? Second by Aaron. So we have a motion and a second to approve section 4 curriculum and student support services as satisfactory. There being no discussion, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. Section 5 is community relations. The board rated Dr. Leck a 3.57 out of 4 under section 5, community relations. Is there a motion?
I move we submit a satisfactory recommendation for community relations for the 3.57.
Thank you. Dan has a motion to approve as satisfactory the section of community relations at a 3.57. And there's a second by Aaron. Any discussion on this section? Any discussion? So we have a motion and a second to approve for satisfactory rating for community relations. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. And section 6 is the last section. Section 6 is operations and resource management. And the average of that was 3.52 out of 4. Is there a motion?
I move to approve section 6 as a satisfactory rating.
Aaron made a motion to approve section 6 for operation resource management at 3.52 satisfactory. Is there a second? Second by Diane. So we have a motion and a second to approve operations and resource management as satisfactory. Is there any discussion? Is there any discussion? Go ahead, Steve.
There's a couple different numbers there.
Oh, did I?
3.58 at the bottom, I'm not sure.
Oh, you know what?
I don't know that it
Yeah,
matters, but.
my signature covered that one, so I'm sorry. So yes, thank you for that clarification. So 3.58, is that the number you said, Aaron, initially that I missed?
No, because.
So, yes.
Amend the motion to approve section 6, satisfactory rating of 3.58.
Okay. And I think the important component is the satisfactory rating, so thank you. And Diane seconded, okay, so 3.58, yes, the signature covered it there, so. So a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Thank you, Steve, for pointing that out. Any other discussion? Any other discussion? So we have a motion and a second for a satisfactory rating of operations and resource management at 3.58 out of 4. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you, Dr. Leck, for serving our district like you do, and we hope to have many continued years with you in our district.
If I may,
You go-
thank you for the
yes.
opportunity to work here. It is the highlight of my professional life to be in Jamestown, so I thank the opportunity to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So moving on our agenda, nothing under policy and procedures, nothing under tuition, and nothing under other. Items for future agenda. Is there items for future agenda that you would like placed on the agenda? Dan?
We had taken an action item from previous board meetings about a review of the curriculum and materials discussion, so just like some update on that at some point.
Okay. Thank you. We'll add that. Aaron?
I would like to see something on there regarding the strategic plan, as far as, what we want to do as a board, and get that out, get some traction on that. We do have the strategic plan. It was put together based on basically 2018
Yep.
information.
Yep.
So I think it would benefit the board to re-engage in there.
Yep, thank you, Aaron. And I know, Dr. Leck, we had a good discussion, and we certainly agree. Does the board, so we have a retreat coming up, and there are some items on that. Does the board want to do a separate retreat? Do we want to, later after, that one's kind of already scheduled, so do you want to do one after that to work on this, or do we want to bring ours forward? I think we're waiting for some components for this at this point yet to get ours completely updated where we're at. Dr. Leck?
Would it be helpful if I put a couple scenarios together of how we might tackle this, just to give some solutions, at least to have discussion to start from? I can see options ranging from bringing Dr. Schatz back to having a board retreat to discuss in more detail to determine where we want to go, to the board directing me to provide updates by a certain time, by a certain date. I could see a couple different ways that this could play out. And so that's kind of what I'm curious as far as giving some options for the board, so we actually have something to chew on and a dialogue to engage in, rather than just a board agenda topic. So is that what you would like to see as a board, to have some options that you can look at? Or do you want to dig deeper at a board retreat or some other kind of meeting?
Dan and then Aaron.
I think that's an excellent idea. I also think that I would not like to combine our regular annual retreat with the strategic plan retreat. I have the option of plenty of time, so if others feel differently, but I would rather have two separate.
I agree with you, Diane.
attacks on the situation.
It's too much and it's too
Yeah,
different.
We don't look forward to that if
yeah.
it's combined.
Yeah, that's too much. Aaron, go ahead.
Just a question on when are we looking at having that retreat? And you mentioned some
That's-
topics of that. Do you have can you give us an idea of what that might
I think we're
look like?
looking at January for our initial retreat, so it would have to probably be after that. I think those are just some discussions that Dr. Luck and I had, like, do we, and like I said, prior to COVID, we had regular progress monitoring. Once COVID hit, we were overwhelmed with board agenda items. I think even right now, as I go through these agendas, we we have more on our, different things on our agenda than we did prior to COVID. We have the construction projects, the change orders, that budget revisions. It's a lot more than what, the long time I've been on the board that we've seen. And so I feel like we're still just kind of leveling out a little bit after COVID. So I think we, Dr. Leck and the board, and we'll have to kind of decide how, do we want to just move forward with what we have? Do we want to, as you mentioned, bring in Dr. Schatz? So those are all really good options. And I don't know that we can decide that like tonight, but I just wanted to give a little bit of information, some things for the board to kind of just chew on and think about a little bit, even as Dr. Leck brings, I think that's a great idea to bring forth some different opportunities. But just kind of wanted to throw that out there. Yes, Aaron? Oh,
Yeah, I think
Dr.
there's a
Leck.
lot of value in having a dialogue and just kind of getting the conversation started and work to build a consensus. I don't have any preconceived notions on what it needs to look like. And again, I think I'd just like to get some traction on is, what should we be looking at in terms of a plan?
Yep, Dr. Leck, go ahead.
Well, and what we can do also is, another option that I could foresee is, do we want to prioritize the January board retreat for strategic planning and shift some of those other conversations for a little bit later, just looking at prioritizing. I could also structure some strategic plan discussion at our January retreat and then build towards something greater in the future. I'm open to what the board needs, but I think there's a fair criticism, as Dr. Larson and I talked about in my evaluation, there's some fair criticism that this hasn't gone as far as it should. I agree with that. I think we can say things got in the way, but the reality is I would have liked for this to have been an annual process as we initially established it, and as progress monitoring as we initially did. But things did get in our way, but it's time, and if we don't, it's time to get that back on track. And if we don't set a time and we don't commit to it as a district, it just continues to be something else that we aren't, it just continues to be a priority that gets moved because there's other things that become priorities too. And I accept that criticism. I think that's fair. But I do think we need to make a commitment to it. So if we aren't doing it in January, I think we at least need to cover to some degree it in January. Even if we follow through and get some guided questions, have some discussions around what is it that the board wants to see from this process, what are the outcomes you hope for, not only in kind of the context of the plan, but in terms of outcomes and monitoring and what is it that you want to see, so we make sure that we can align what we're doing with what the board is wanting that to look like. And like I said, not just the revision of the plan. I think that's a much more engaged process than having a conversation about what do we want that to look like and how do we want this monitoring and outcomes to feel like. So maybe that's where we can start the conversation, if that's agreeable to the board.
I think that's great. I don't, just piggyback a little bit on Diane, I also think that we don't want to take away from, because I think our retreats are very valuable, but I also think some of the things we've discussed that we're going to be doing, the activities we're going to be doing at retreats, might kind of feed into our strategic plan thinking, like learning outcomes and those kinds of things. So I think it's going to kind of maybe get the wheels turning a little bit as we go through some of those activities. I've enjoyed every one of our board retreats that we've done over the years. I think they're very, very valuable, and I think it's good that if we do those things that feed into it, but I don't want to also take away. What are the thoughts of the board, of the rest of the board? Aaron, go ahead, and then Dan.
Yeah, I'd support doing that in the retreat, just getting conversation started, and then again, building that consensus, and then, kind of defining how we want this thing to lay out.
Okay.
And what is the role of the board, and, how active are we in that participation? So I think that's a good place to start.
Thanks, Aaron. Dan, and then Diane. Go ahead.
Agreed. Basic framework to start with.
Okay.
So we'll probably have to do some homework and
Work sessions.
other work sessions to
Yes.
actually figure out what we want.
Okay. Diane?
I think that you're right, the time spent not doing this is very valuable. So I would suggest that the guided questions are a good idea. Maybe we could have 5 guided questions or so at the end of our regular activities, and then all of us would feel more comfortable that, you know, we were going to be able to get to this in the near future.
Thank you, Diane. Any other discussion by the board? Dr. Leck, do you feel like you need more direction, or are you
I think
ready to go with that?
plans.
Okay, okay, all right, thank you for that. Okay, items for future agenda, anything else? Anything else? I guess one of the things that I would like to see in the future, and we can look at our time, but whether we do this on a future agenda or we do it at this retreat, but our board norms, I think, I'm not suggesting they completely be revised, but I think at least just revisited, because we have kind of a new board makeup, and I think it's important that the board has ownership of our board norms. So I think at some point, I would like to see that. That would be my item. Anything else for future agendas? Okay. Moving on, meetings to be scheduled. There's a health insurance meeting on Monday, November 14th, 2022 at 3:45 p.m. in the multipurpose conference room. And B, facility tour for school board members at 4 p.m. at the high school. And that's prior to the next meeting on November 21st. And then our next meeting is November 21st at 5:15 p.m. And this is where we're going to tour the high school, and then we're going to have the board meeting in the media room at the high school. So that is the plan. Reminder to do your monthly superintendent evaluations, Section 2, Board Relations, and Section 5, Community Relations. I think the next board superintendent evaluation comes up in March, so it comes up very quickly. And there being no further agenda items or business before the board, the meeting is adjourned.